I came home from work on a Tuesday afternoon to find three middle-aged women standing in my detached garage, taking measurements around my brake lathe like they owned the place. The garage door was wide open, which was strange because I always kept it locked. My property in Scottsdale, Arizona, had been my sanctuary for the past 8 years. Ever since I bought this house with its generous 2-acre lot in the Sunset Hills subdivision. The detached garage sat about 50 feet from my main house, and I had converted it into my personal machine shop where I restored classic cars and motorcycles. My brake lathe was the centerpiece of that operation, a beautiful 1970s Amco drum and rotor lathe that I had rescued from a closed-down shop in Tempe and restored to perfect working condition. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward them. "Can I help you ladies with something?" The woman in the center turned around. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit despite the Arizona heat, and her blonde hair was cut in that distinctive speak to the manager style that made my stomach drop. Her name tag read Brenda Morrison, HOA president. "Oh, you must be Ethan Jensen," she said, not extending her hand. "We have been trying to reach you for weeks." "My phone has been working fine," I replied, crossing my arms, "and that does not explain why you are in my locked garage." Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "The HOA has master keys to all structures on HOA property for emergency inspections. It is in the bylaws." I felt my jaw tighten. "This is not HOA property. This is my private property." "Actually," Brenda said, pulling out a folder from her designer handbag, "according to the revised community guidelines that were voted on 3 months ago, all structures within the Sunset Hills subdivision fall under HOA jurisdiction for aesthetic and community improvement purposes." "I never got a notice about any vote," I said. "We sent emails to all residents," one of the other women chimed in. She had dark hair and looked slightly uncomfortable with this whole situation. "I did not receive any email," I insisted. "And even if there was a vote, you cannot just walk into my private garage without permission." Brenda sighed dramatically. "Mr. Jensen, we are not here to argue property rights with you. We are here because the HOA board has approved a wonderful new community wellness initiative. We are going to be installing meditation spaces throughout the neighborhood, and your garage has been selected as one of the locations." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I said, "You want to put a meditation space in my machine shop?" "Not in it, dear. We are going to clear out some of this equipment and create a beautiful Zen garden right here in this space. This garage is barely being used anyway, and it would be such a wonderful addition to the community." Barely being used. I walked over to my brake lathe and put my hand on it protectively. "I use this equipment every single day. I run a side business restoring vehicles. This is not some abandoned building." Brenda made a note on her clipboard. "According to our records, you have not registered a business with the HOA, which means any commercial activity is actually prohibited. So that is another violation we will need to address. It is not a commercial business. I do restoration work as a hobby, and sometimes I sell the finished vehicles. That is not the same thing." "We can discuss the semantics later," Brenda said. "The point is, the community has spoken, and we need to move forward with this initiative. The Zen garden installation is scheduled to begin next Monday. We will need you to remove your equipment by this weekend." "I am not removing anything," I said firmly. "This is my property, my garage, and my equipment. You cannot just commandeer it for some community project." Brenda's expression hardened. "Mr. Jensen, I understand that change can be difficult, but the HOA has legal authority here. If you refuse to comply, we will have no choice but to pursue fines and legal action." The daily fine for non-compliance is $500. $500 a day. I felt my blood pressure rising. For not letting you steal my garage. For violating HOA regulations, Brenda corrected. This is all perfectly legal, I assure you. Our attorney has reviewed everything. The third woman, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Brenda, maybe we should give him more time to review the documentation. This seems like a lot to spring on someone. Thank you, Patricia, but we have a timeline to maintain, Brenda replied coldly. Mr. Jensen, you will receive formal notification by email tonight. You have until Friday at 5 p.m. to clear your equipment. Have a blessed day. The three women filed out of my garage, leaving me standing there in shock. I immediately went to check my garage door lock. It had not been picked or damaged. They really did have a key. I made a mental note to change the locks immediately. HOA bylaws be damned. That evening, I did receive an email. It contained a 20-page PDF document outlining the Sunset Hills Community Wellness Initiative. Apparently, the HOA board had decided that the neighborhood needed more peaceful gathering spaces and had identified several underutilized structures that would be converted. My garage was listed as Meditation Space Number 3, the Tranquility Garden. The document showed elaborate plans for a Japanese-style Zen garden, complete with sand beds, carefully placed rocks, a small water feature, and minimalist landscaping. It looked expensive and completely absurd. According to the plans, they intended to remove my brake lathe and other equipment, pour a decorative gravel floor, and install all of these garden features where my tools currently sat. I spent the next 2 hours digging through my old paperwork. When I had bought the house 8 years ago, the HOA had been a minimal presence. They collected small annual dues for maintaining the entrance sign and organizing an annual block party. That was it. I found my original HOA documents, and nowhere in them did it say anything about the HOA having authority over private structures or the ability to commandeer property for community projects. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney named Marcus Webb, whose office was in Phoenix. I had used him when I bought the house, and he had always been straightforward with me. "Ethan, good to hear from you," Marcus said when his secretary put me through. "What can I do for you?" I explained the situation, reading him relevant sections from both my original HOA documents and the new email I had received. Marcus was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Okay, this is interesting. First question, did you actually receive notice about any vote to change the HOA bylaws?" "No." "They claim they sent an email 3 months ago, but I never got it. I check my email daily." "That is a problem for them. Arizona law requires that HOA bylaw amendments must be properly noticed to all members. An email is acceptable notice, but they have to prove it was sent and delivered." Second question, did you attend the annual HOA meeting this year? I groaned. "No, I have never attended one. They have always been just social gatherings, nothing important." "That might have hurt you. But here is the thing, even if they did properly amend their bylaws, which is doubtful, they cannot just take over your private structure. The garage is on your property, right? Not common area, definitely on my property. It is clearly within my lot boundaries. Then they are overreaching. An HOA can regulate the appearance of structures, make you paint your garage a certain color, things like that. But they cannot seize it for their own use. That is not how property law works. The fact that they cut a key and entered without your permission is also problematic. That could be trespassing." "So what do I do?" I asked. "First, change your locks immediately. Second, I will send them a cease and desist letter today. Third, do not move your equipment. Stay put and document everything. If they try to enter your property again, call the police. And Ethan, check your spam folder for that email they claim they sent. We need to know if there is any record of it. After hanging up with Marcus, I checked my spam folder. There was nothing from the HOA. I also checked my email settings and confirmed that their email address was not blocked. Either they had never sent the notice, or it had gone to the wrong address. I called a locksmith and had the garage locks changed that afternoon. The locksmith, a friendly guy named Dave, told me that he had actually changed locks for 3 other homeowners in Sunset Hills in the past month for similar reasons. The HOA in this neighborhood has gone crazy, Dave said as he installed a new deadbolt. I have heard stories. They tried to fine one guy because his Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white. Another family got threatened with legal action because their dog barked during designated quiet hours. When did all this start? I asked. About 6 months ago, when that Morrison woman took over as president. Before that, this was one of the most laid-back HOAs in Scottsdale. That night, I researched Brenda Morrison. It turned out she had moved to Sunset Hills only a year ago. She had immediately inserted herself into the HOA board, and within 6 months, she had orchestrated some kind of coup that resulted in her becoming president. Several long-time board members had resigned, and Brenda had replaced them with her friends. The HOA had gone from a 3-person casual board to a 7-person formal board with committees, subcommittees, and all sorts of bureaucratic structure. Friday came faster than I wanted. At 4 p.m., there was a knock on my front door. I opened it to find Brenda standing there with a man in a suit. "Mr. Jensen," Brenda said with false sweetness. "This is our HOA attorney, Gerald Kincaid. We are here to do a final check before the installation begins tomorrow." "You are not checking anything," I said. "My attorney has sent you a cease and desist letter. You do not have permission to enter my property or my garage." Gerald Kincaid stepped forward. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a condescending smile. "Mr. Jensen, I have reviewed your attorney's letter. It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of HOA law. The community covenants give the HOA broad authority to manage community resources." "My private garage is not a community resource," I said. "The community has voted otherwise," Kincaid replied. "Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you let us complete our inspection, and tomorrow we begin the installation. The hard way is we fine you $500 per day starting today, and we pursue legal action to enforce compliance. Do what you have to do," I said and closed the door. Through my front window, I watched them walk around to my garage. Brenda tried the door and found it locked. She gestured angrily, and Kincaid made notes on his tablet. They took pictures of the garage exterior, then got in their car and left. 20 minutes later, I received an email informing me that I was being fined $500 per day for non-compliance, effective immediately. Attached was an invoice for $500 due within 30 days. Saturday morning, I woke up early and went out to my garage to work on a 1968 Mustang I was restoring. The brake lathe was essential for my work. I was refinishing the brake drums and rotors, and this particular lathe had just the right specifications for classic car work. Modern lathes were all designed for newer vehicles and did not work as well with vintage parts. I had been working for about an hour when I heard vehicles pulling up. I looked out to see a moving truck, a landscaping truck, and 3 cars parking in front of my property. Brenda got out of one car, along with several other people I did not recognize. I walked out of my garage and stood in my driveway with my arms crossed. Brenda walked up to me with a clipboard. "Mr. Jensen, The installation team is here. We need to begin work immediately. Please move your vehicle so they can access the garage. No, I said simply. Mr. Jensen, you are making this very difficult. We have a schedule to keep. I do not care about your schedule. This is my property and you are not touching my garage. A large man in a landscaping company uniform walked over. His shirt said Desert Oasis Landscaping. He looked uncomfortable. Madam, he said to Brenda, if the property owner is refusing access, we cannot legally proceed. We need written permission to work on private property. Brenda spun on him. We have permission from the HOA board, which has legal authority here. The landscaper shook his head. I do not know about HOA law, madam, but I do know that I am not entering someone's property against their will. That is how people get sued or shot. No offense, sir, he added, looking at me. None taken, I said. You are making the right call. Brenda's face was turning red. Fine. We will return with a police escort to enforce the HOA's legal rights. She gathered her people and they all left. I went back to work in my garage, but I kept my phone nearby and made sure my security cameras were recording. 2 hours later, 2 Scottsdale Police Department patrol cars pulled up, followed by Brenda's car. 2 officers got out and Brenda rushed up to them, talking rapidly and pointing at my garage. One of the officers, a young guy with a buzz cut, walked over to me. Sir, are you the property owner? Yes, I am Ethan Jensen. I own this house and that garage. Can you explain what is going on here? I gave him a brief rundown of the situation. The officer took notes, then walked back to Brenda. I could not hear their conversation, but I could see Brenda getting more and more animated. She kept pointing at documents on her clipboard. The officer returned to me. Sir, the HOA president claims they have legal authority to access your garage for a community project. She is asking us to escort their workers onto the property. Officer, that garage is on my private property. I own it. The HOA has no legal right to enter it or use it. My attorney has already sent them a cease and desist letter. This is a civil property dispute, not a criminal matter. The officer nodded slowly. I agree. This sounds like a civil issue that needs to be resolved in court. We cannot force entry to your property based on an HOA claim. He walked back to Brenda and explained this to her. She started arguing loudly, and I could now hear her from where I stood. This is ridiculous. The HOA has legal authority. This man is violating community regulations. The second officer, an older woman with sergeant stripes, stepped in. Madam, what you are describing is a civil dispute. The police do not enforce HOA regulations. If you believe you have legal authority to access this property, you need to get a court order. Until then, the property owner has the right to deny access. This is outrageous, Brenda shouted. I will be filing a complaint with your department. That is your right, madam, the sergeant said calmly. But right now, you need to leave this property before the homeowner decides to press trespassing charges. Brenda glared at me, then got back in her car and left. The landscaping truck and other vehicles followed her. The officers came over to talk to me. Sir, you might want to document all of this, the sergeant said. Take photos, keep records of all communications. If this escalates, you will want that documentation. I have been doing that, I said. I also have security cameras recording. Good. And just so you know, we have been getting a lot of calls from this neighborhood lately. The HOA here seems to be causing problems for a lot of people. After the police left, I called Marcus Webb and updated him. He was pleased that I had stood my ground but warned me that this was far from over. Brenda Morrison sounds like she has a personality disorder, Marcus said. People like that do not back down easily. She's going to escalate this. Be prepared for more fines, possibly a lawsuit. The good news is that she does not have a legal leg to stand on. The bad news is that does not mean she will not try. That night, I received another email from the HOA. My daily fines were being increased to $1,000 per day for willful and aggressive non-compliance. Additionally, I was being fined an extra $5,000 for interfering with a sanctioned HOA project. Monday morning, I had to go to work. I was a mechanical engineer at an aerospace company in Phoenix, and I had meetings I could not miss. I worried all day about what might happen at my house while I was gone. I checked my security camera app multiple times. At around 2 p.m., my cameras picked up activity. Brenda's car pulled up, along with a different landscaping truck. Several people got out and walked right up to my garage. One of them, a young guy in work clothes, pulled out a crowbar and started prying at my new lock. I immediately called 911 and reported a break-in in progress. Then I called Marcus. "They are breaking into my garage right now," I told him. "It is on camera. The police are on the way." "Perfect," Marcus said. "Do not delete that footage. This is criminal trespass, possibly breaking and entering. They just handed us a huge advantage." I stayed on the line with Marcus while I watched my camera feed. The worker got my garage door open. Several people entered, including Brenda. They walked around my equipment, taking measurements and pointing at different areas. The police arrived within 10 minutes. This time it was 3 patrol cars. I watched on my phone as the officers entered my open garage and confronted everyone inside. There was a lot of animated discussion. Eventually, everyone was escorted out. Brenda was clearly arguing, gesturing wildly at the officers. I left work early and drove home as fast as safely possible. When I arrived, there were still 2 patrol cars in front of my house. The sergeant from Saturday was there, along with another officer. "Mr. Jensen," the sergeant greeted me. "We caught several people inside your garage. They forced entry using a crowbar. That is criminal trespass and criminal damage. We need to know if you want to press charges." "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "That is what I figured. We are going to need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Also, we will need copies of your security footage." "The HOA president is here, the one from Saturday." "Brenda Morrison, yes. She is in one of our vehicles. She claims she has legal authority to be here, but we have explained that forcing entry is a crime regardless of any civil authority claim. She is not happy." I looked over and saw Brenda sitting in the back of a patrol car. She was staring at me with pure hatred. Over the next 2 weeks, things got complicated. Brenda and 3 other people were charged with criminal trespass and criminal damage. Marcus filed a civil lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, attempted property seizure, and violation of property rights. The local news picked up the story because it was such a bizarre situation. A reporter from a Phoenix news station came out and interviewed me. "So the HOA wanted to put a Zen garden in your garage?" The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Tran, asked me on camera. "That is correct. They wanted me to remove my equipment, which I use daily for vehicle restoration work, so they could build a meditation space. And they broke into your garage when you refused." "Yes, it is all on security camera footage." The story aired that evening and immediately went viral online. Suddenly, I was getting calls from news outlets across the country, and my story was being shared on social media. The narrative that caught on was HOA Gone Mad, Forced Zen Garden Edition. The attention brought other Sunset Hills residents out of the woodwork. I learned that Brenda had been terrorizing multiple homeowners with absurd fines and regulations. One couple had been fined $10,000 because their fence was 4 inches taller than the newly established maximum height. Another homeowner was being fined for having a vegetable garden in their backyard, which Brenda claimed violated aesthetic standards. A group of about 20 homeowners organized and hired Marcus Webb as a collective to fight back against the HOA. We discovered that when Brenda amended the HOA bylaws, she had done so without proper notice to all homeowners. The vote she claimed happened had only 7 votes cast, all from her and her board cronies. The amendment required a majority of all homeowners to approve, which would have been at least 75 votes from our community of 148 homes. This meant all of her bylaw changes were invalid. Marcus filed a motion to have the entire current HOA board removed and the bylaws reverted to their original form. The judge hearing the case seemed sympathetic to our position, but during all of this, I still had a problem. Despite the criminal charges and the pending lawsuits, despite the media attention and public outrage, Brenda Morrison was not giving up on her Zen garden idea. One Thursday afternoon, about 3 weeks after the break-in incident, I came home to find that something was different. My garage door was still locked and secure. Nothing had been disturbed inside, but when I walked into my garage, I noticed that items had been moved slightly. Nothing major, just small shifts. A toolbox had been moved 6 inches to the left. Some shop rags were rearranged. Then I noticed something on my brake lathe. There were 3 small rocks arranged on top of the machine in a triangular pattern. Smooth river rocks, the kind you would find in a Zen garden, and there was a thin layer of decorative sand spread across the top of my lathe. I felt my anger rising. Someone had been in here again, but this time they had not forced entry. I checked all my locks and windows. Everything was secure. I checked my security cameras. Nothing had recorded anyone entering. Then I noticed that my side door, the one that led from the garage to my backyard, had fresh scratches around the lock. Someone had picked it. That door was not covered by my cameras because I never used it and had assumed it was secure. The next day, I installed another camera covering that door and added a second deadbolt. Friday afternoon, I was working in the garage when I heard voices outside. I looked out to see Brenda and 2 other women from the HOA walking through my backyard like they owned the place. They were carrying clipboards and taking pictures. I went out to confront them. "You are trespassing." Again, Brenda did not even look startled. "We are conducting a site survey for the approved Zen garden installation. Once the legal complications are resolved, we want to be ready to proceed immediately." "There are no legal complications. You do not have permission to be here. You do not have permission to touch my garage, and you definitely do not have permission to put rocks and sand on my equipment." "I have no idea what you are talking about," Brenda said with a smile that told me she knew exactly what I was talking about. "Leave my property now, or I am calling the police." "Oh, Mr. Jensen, you really should not waste police resources. They told you this is a civil matter." She walked closer to me. "You know what your problem is? You are selfish. This community needs healing spaces. People are stressed. They need places to meditate and find inner peace. But you care more about your silly machines than about the well-being of your neighbors." "My silly machines are my livelihood and my property. You do not get to take them just because you decided the community needs a Zen garden." "We will see what the courts say," Brenda replied. She and her companions walked out of my backyard, taking their time, stopping to take more pictures and make more notes. That evening, I installed an even more sophisticated security system with cameras covering every angle of my property. I also added motion sensor alarms. The harassment continued. Every few days, I would find small Zen garden elements placed around my property. River rocks on my front porch. a small bamboo plant left by my mailbox, a miniature rake stuck in the dirt near my garage. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. I was constantly on edge, constantly checking my cameras, constantly worried about what I would find next. Marcus assured me that the legal case was going well. The judge had ordered mediation between the homeowners and the HOA board. During mediation, which I attended along with Marcus and about 15 other affected homeowners, Brenda was completely unreasonable. "These people are trying to destroy the community I have built," she said to the mediator, a patient older man named Richard Flores. "Mrs. Morrison," Richard said, "you cannot simply take over someone's private property for an HOA project. That exceeds your authority." "The community voted," Brenda insisted. "7 people is not a quorum," Marcus interjected. "You needed 75 votes minimum. You also failed to provide proper notice. Your bylaw amendments are invalid." Brenda stood up abruptly. "I am not going to sit here and be attacked. This mediation is over." She stormed out. Her attorney, Gerald Kincaid, looked embarrassed and apologized before following her. Richard Flores sighed. "Well, I will have to report to the judge that mediation was unsuccessful. This will likely go to trial." 2 days later, I came home from work to find the impossible. My garage had been broken into again. This time, there was no subtle lock picking. The door had been pried open, damaging the frame. And inside, someone had built an actual Zen garden around my brake lathe. They had spread a 4-inch layer of white decorative gravel across the entire floor. Larger rocks were arranged in careful patterns. A small water fountain had been set up in the corner, running on a battery pack. Bamboo plants in pots were positioned around the space, and my brake lathe sat in the middle of it all like an industrial island in a sea of forced tranquility. My other equipment had been pushed to the walls and covered with canvas tarps. The whole thing looked professionally done, like something out of a home improvement magazine. It must have taken hours and multiple people to complete. I was furious. I immediately called 911, then called Marcus. The police response was swift. The same sergeant from before arrived with 3 other officers. They documented everything, took photos, and collected evidence. "This is escalating," the sergeant told me. "This is now the 3rd break-in. The earlier charges are still pending, and now we have another incident. Do you have security footage?" "Yes, but I need to review it. Let me pull it up." We went inside my house and I accessed my security system on my computer. The footage showed that the break-in had occurred between noon and 4 p.m. while I was at work. A moving truck had pulled up. 6 people, all wearing unmarked work clothes, had unloaded materials and entered my garage. They worked for about 3 hours, building the Zen garden around my equipment. But here is what was interesting. Brenda Morrison was not in the footage. None of the HOA board members I recognized were there. Just these 6 workers who had clearly been hired for the job. "They are trying to create plausible deniability," Marcus said when I called him after the police left. "Brenda hired people to do it so she could claim she was not involved. But we can still prove the connection. The HOA has to have paid for this somehow. There will be financial records." I was too angry to sleep that night. I kept looking at the photos the police had given me copies of. My beautiful machine shop, violated and transformed into this absurd meditation space. The brake lathe that I had lovingly restored was now surrounded by raked gravel and decorative rocks. At around 3 a.m., I made a decision. I was done playing defense. It was time to take my garage back. The next morning was Saturday. I woke up at dawn and went out to my garage with purpose. I started with the water fountain, unplugging it and moving it out to my driveway. Then, I removed the bamboo plants one by one, placing them on the driveway. The decorative rocks went next. I spent 2 hours picking up rocks and piling them outside. Then I got a large shovel and started scooping up the white gravel. It was back-breaking work. 4 inches of gravel covering a 20 by 30-foot space is a lot of material. I filled garbage bags, wheelbarrow loads, anything I could find. By noon, I had cleared about half of the gravel, revealing my original concrete floor underneath. A car pulled up. I expected police or Brenda, but it was actually my neighbor from 3 houses down, a guy named Tom Reeves who I occasionally talked to about cars. "Hey, Ethan, I heard about what has been happening," Tom said. "That is absolutely insane. You need help?" I would not turn it down, I admitted. Tom made some calls, and within an hour, 6 of my neighbors showed up with shovels, wheelbarrows, and garbage bags. We worked together through the afternoon, clearing out every trace of the Zen garden. We bagged up all the gravel, removed all the rocks, and cleaned my garage back to its original state. "Where do you want all this stuff?" Tom asked, gesturing to the massive pile of Zen garden materials now sitting in my driveway. An idea formed in my mind. A petty, vindictive, absolutely perfect idea. "Help me load it into my truck," I said. We loaded everything into my F-250 and Tom's truck. Then we drove to Brenda Morrison's house, which was only 6 blocks away in the same subdivision. Brenda's house was a large, modern construction with a manicured front lawn and professional landscaping. We pulled up and started unloading. We piled all the gravel, all the rocks, the bamboo plants, the water fountain, everything right in her front yard. We arranged it in a chaotic heap, the opposite of the careful Zen aesthetic she had tried to force on my garage. We had just finished when Brenda's front door flew open. She came storming out in a bathrobe, her hair in curlers. "What do you think you are doing?" she screamed. "Returning your property," I said calmly. "You left all of this stuff in my garage. I thought you might want it back. You cannot dump trash on my property." "It is not trash. It is a Zen garden. You love Zen gardens. I figured you would want it more than I did." Several other neighbors had come out of their houses to watch. A few were recording on their phones. Brenda looked around at the growing audience, her face bright red. "I am calling the police," she shouted. "Good idea," I replied. "I need to file another report about you breaking into my garage anyway." Tom and the other neighbors and I got back in our trucks and left. As we drove away, I could see Brenda in my rearview mirror, standing in her yard, surrounded by the pile of Zen garden materials, screaming at no one in particular. The police did come to my house later that day. It was the same sergeant, and she looked tired. "Mr. Jensen, I understand you removed materials from your garage and deposited them on Mrs. Morrison's property." "I returned materials that she had illegally placed in my garage after breaking in," I clarified. "I have documentation that all of those items were installed in my garage without my permission during a criminal trespass." The sergeant nodded slowly. "Mrs. Morrison wants to press charges for illegal dumping, and I want to press charges for the latest break-in. Did you see my security footage?" "They installed all of that during a 4-hour break-in yesterday." "Yes, I reviewed the footage. We are investigating. But Ethan, between you and me, this escalating back and forth has to stop. Someone is going to get hurt or arrested, and I would prefer it not be you." "I understand, Sergeant. I am not trying to cause trouble. I just want to be left alone to use my own property." She left without charging me with anything. Apparently, returning stolen property to the thief, even in a dramatic fashion, was not quite illegal. That evening, I got a call from Marcus. "Ethan, you beautiful maniac. Do you know what you just did? Returned some property. You forced Brenda to claim ownership of the Zen garden materials. To press charges against you for dumping, she had to admit that the materials were hers, which means she had to admit she was responsible for having them installed in your garage. She just confessed to the break-in. I felt a smile spreading across my face. I did not even think about that. Well, the police certainly did. I just got a call from the prosecutor's office. They are adding charges against Brenda Morrison. She is going to be arrested. Monday morning, I was at work when I got a text from Tom with a photo. It showed 2 Scottsdale police cars parked in front of Brenda's house. The caption read, "She is being arrested right now." Marcus confirmed it later that day. Brenda Morrison had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of criminal trespass, criminal damage, and conspiracy. Her bond was set at $50,000. Gerald Kincaid, her HOA attorney, was desperately trying to distance himself from the whole situation. The other HOA board members who had been involved in various incidents were also facing charges. Patricia Norris and Linda Webster, the 2 women who had been with Brenda during the original garage inspection, were charged as accessories. The judge in our civil case against the HOA was not pleased with these developments. At an emergency hearing, he ruled that all of Brenda's bylaw changes were null and void. He also ordered the HOA to immediately cease all enforcement actions against homeowners and to refund all fines that had been collected under the invalid bylaws. For me, that meant the supposed $500 per day fines and the additional penalties, which had theoretically accumulated to over $40,000, were wiped out. I owed nothing. The judge went further. He appointed a special master to oversee the HOA and ordered a new election for the board, supervised by an independent third party to ensure legitimacy. Over the next 2 months, things slowly returned to normal. Brenda Morrison took a plea deal. She pled guilty to misdemeanor trespass and criminal damage charges, received probation, community service, and was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona. She was also ordered to pay restitution to me for the damage to my garage door and locks. Patricia Norris and Linda Webster also took plea deals and resigned from the HOA board. Gerald Kincaid, the HOA attorney, was investigated by the Arizona State Bar for ethics violations. Apparently, he had been giving Brenda legal advice he knew was incorrect, possibly to generate more legal fees. He ended up getting a public censure and a temporary suspension of his law license. The 6 workers who had installed the Zen garden were harder to track down. They had been hired through a cash payment by Brenda, and most of them were day laborers who had no idea they were committing a crime. The police decided not to pursue charges against them. Desert Oasis Landscaping, the company that had initially refused to work on my property without permission, sent me a gift basket thanking me for the positive publicity they received when news stories mentioned that they had refused to participate in the illegal project. The new HOA election was held in November, about 5 months after this all started. A slate of reform candidates ran on a platform of returning the HOA to its original, minimal role. They won in a landslide. The new board's first action was to issue a formal apology to all homeowners who had been harassed under Brenda's leadership. The second action was to pass a resolution that the HOA would never, under any circumstances, attempt to use private property for community projects without explicit written permission from the property owner. Tom Reeves, who had helped me clear out the Zen garden, was elected to the board and became vice president. He called me a week after the election. "Hey, Ethan, the board wants to do something nice for you. After everything you went through, fighting off Brenda and basically saving the neighborhood from her crazy schemes, What do you think about us naming the community entrance feature after you? That is nice, Tom, but not necessary. How about this? We want to sponsor a community car show and we would like you to organize it. You could show off some of the restoration work you do, get other car people involved, make it a nice event. I considered it. That actually sounds fun. Let me think about it. The car show ended up happening the following spring. I displayed the 1968 Mustang I had been working on, the one I had been using the brake lathe for when this whole mess started. About 30 other classic car owners from around Scottsdale brought their vehicles. We had food trucks, live music, and raised money for a local veterans charity. Brenda Morrison moved out of Sunset Hills in February. Her house sold quickly to a nice young family with 2 kids. I never saw her again. My garage went back to being exactly what it was supposed to be, my machine shop and personal sanctuary. The brake lathe that had been the center of this absurd conflict continued to serve me well. I used it to restore brakes on a 1972 Corvette, a 1965 Thunderbird, and eventually started teaching basic automotive restoration classes to interested neighbors in my garage. One Saturday afternoon, about a year after everything had settled down, I was in my garage working on a brake drum when Tom stopped by. "Hey, Ethan, I was just thinking about the whole Zen garden thing," he said. "You ever think about what Brenda was actually trying to do? Like, was she really that crazy, or was there something else going on?" I had actually thought about this a lot. I think she genuinely believed she was improving the community. In her mind, she was this benevolent leader making everyone's lives better. The fact that she was trampling on people's rights and breaking laws did not matter to her because she was convinced she knew what was best. "That is pretty narcissistic," Tom observed. "Yeah. I think positions like HOA president attract a certain type of person. Someone who likes control, who likes having authority over others. Most HOAs stay reasonable because most board members are normal people who just want to help maintain the neighborhood. But when someone like Brenda gets power, it can spiral out of control fast." Tom nodded. "Well, the new board is boring as hell, and I mean that as a compliment. We meet once a quarter, make sure the common area landscaping is maintained, and that is about it, the way it should be." "I will drink to that," I said, and we went inside for a beer. Looking back on the whole experience, I learned several important lessons. First, read your HOA documents carefully and show up to meetings, even if they seem pointless. If I had been paying attention, I might have caught Brenda's power grab earlier. Second, document everything. My security cameras and saved emails were crucial to my legal defense. Third, stand up for your rights even when it is hard and expensive. If I had just given in and let them take my garage, who knows what they would have demanded next. But the biggest lesson was about community. When Brenda was terrorizing the neighborhood, people felt isolated and powerless. But once we organized and fought back together, we were able to defeat her schemes and restore sanity to our HOA. The neighbors who helped me clear out the Zen garden, the other homeowners who joined the lawsuit, the new board members who ran for office to fix things, we all did this together. My brake lathe still sits in my garage, right where it belongs. I use it almost every day. Sometimes when I am working on it, smoothing down a brake drum or truing a rotor, I think about how close I came to losing it. How this machine, this tool that brings me so much satisfaction and helps me create beautiful restored vehicles, was almost buried under decorative gravel and river rocks because someone else decided they knew better how my property should be used. The Zen garden that Brenda tried to force on me was supposed to be a place of peace and tranquility. The irony is that my garage, with its machinery and tools and ongoing projects, is my peaceful place. It is where I find tranquility. Everyone's idea of a peaceful space is different, and nobody should have the right to force their vision on someone else's private property. I finished restoring the Mustang and sold it to a collector in California for a good profit. I used some of that money to upgrade my brake lathe with new cutting tools and measurement equipment. I also donated some money to a legal aid fund that Marcus Webb's firm had set up to help homeowners fight abusive HOAs. The criminal cases against Brenda and her associates were fully resolved within 18 months. Besides Brenda, 2 other former board members ended up with criminal records. The financial fallout was significant too. The HOA's insurance did not cover intentional illegal acts, so the legal fees came out of HOA reserves. The association ended up having to take out a loan to cover all the costs, which meant everyone's HOA dues went up slightly for a few years to pay it back. Some of the homeowners who had not been directly affected by Brenda's schemes were annoyed about the higher dues. But Tom and the other board members did a good job explaining that this was the cost of allowing a tyrant to take over the HOA, and that the new oversight measures would prevent it from happening again. The media attention faded quickly, as it always does. For about a month, I was the guy from the Zen Garden HOA story. People recognized me at the grocery store. I gave a few interviews to local news and some national podcasts. Then, a new crazy story took over the news cycle and everyone forgot about me. I was fine with that. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to be left alone to work on cars in my garage. The last time anything related to the Zen Garden incident came up was about 2 years later. I was at a car show in Phoenix, not the one in my neighborhood but a big regional show. I was looking at a beautifully restored 1957 Chevy when a woman approached me. "Are you Ethan Jensen?" she asked. She was in her 50s, well-dressed, and had a kind face. "Yes," I said cautiously, wondering if this was another reporter or lawyer. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "I live in a neighborhood in Mesa. Our HOA was going down the same path as yours. We had a president who was imposing all sorts of crazy rules and fines. When I saw your story in the news, it inspired me and some other homeowners to fight back. We organized, hired an attorney, and got our board removed. Our neighborhood is so much better now." "That is great to hear," I said, genuinely pleased. "Your story gave us hope that we could win. So thank you. You probably do not know how many people you helped by standing up to that woman." After she left, I thought about that. I had just been trying to protect my property and my equipment. I did not set out to be any kind of activist or inspiration. But I guess by refusing to be bullied, by standing firm and fighting back through legal channels, I had inadvertently shown other people that it was possible to resist HOA overreach. That was a good feeling. My garage has been undisturbed ever since. Well, undisturbed by HOA intruders anyway. It gets plenty disturbed by me as I continue to work on restoration projects. I have done 4 more complete vehicle restorations since the Mustang. I have also started collecting vintage tools and equipment, including another brake lathe that I picked up at an estate sale. Sometimes when I am working late at night in my garage, I think about alternate timelines. What if I had not been home that day when Brenda and her crew first showed up? What if I had decided it was not worth fighting and just moved my equipment? What if I had not had security cameras, or a good attorney, or supportive neighbors in any of those scenarios? I might have lost. Brenda might have succeeded. My garage might actually be a Zen garden right now, and I would be working out of a storage unit somewhere, bitter and defeated. But that is not what happened. I fought back, I won, and my brake lathe is right where it belongs in my garage, ready for the next restoration project. And that is worth more than any meditation space could ever be.